Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us here tonight to hear Tommy, Daniel, Grace, and Sophie's talks, presentations on their Smith Fellowships. For those that don't know, the Smith Fellowship is an opportunity for students to spend 6 weeks exploring and encountering the Catholic and Dominican identity around the world. So I don't want to give away where these students went or what they did. Some of you probably know most of it, but they're just here to give you a little glimpse into their 6 weeks. There's no way we could do justice to their entire 6-week experience, and truly the past year since they started this, about this time last year, the application process. But we just want to give you a brief intro, and then at the end, if you're interested in applying for this yourselves, you're a sophomore or junior, give you more information on where to find the application and all that. So without further ado, I'll welcome Grace to give her, I'm welcoming Daniel and Tommy. And gonna change a slide.
Good fella evening. Name me Tommy, name him Daniel, and me tell I like talk a little bit about Solomon Islands, which is by saying, hello, I'm Tommy, this is Daniel, and we'd love to talk to you a little bit about the Solomon Islands. Point out a few things. These are both taken in 2 islands. So on the left side, you can kind of see it's a leaf hut, and it's on the water. And this is on our way from the city of Auki to the village of Buma, and we're on like a little speedboat, traveling with 2 priests, and they're taking us to go to our place where we're going to stay. We're going to stay in the village for about a week with the Legion of Mary. And it was a really beautiful boat ride, just seeing the mountainscape of the island of Maleta and these structures where people are living, and it's kind of unbelievable. And on the right side, this was at a confirmation in Visale Parish. You can kind of see this is Bishop, and they processed out. There's probably like maybe 500, 600 people at this church, and they all process out to the statue of the cross with the Sacred Heart at Sacred Heart Parish for the end of this confirmation mass, where 216 youth were confirmed. Yeah, we'll get started. So I'll kind of begin talking about my experience, and Dan will kind of jump in too. But we try to break it down kind of into themes, because it's hard to condense 6 weeks of impactful, formative experiences and stories into 15 minutes at a time. But my first theme that I want to talk about is what we call the joy of presence, which leads to the ministry of presence. For me, going into this fellowship, being present is something that I would struggle with. Like, I think all of us as college students or professors or workers in general, just our heads are everywhere at once, and we never know where we are. We know where our mind is, and it's always racing. And so when we arrived in the Solomon Islands, in this place where everything is just very calm, and people are very content and happy, and they can just kind of be. The bishop that we stayed with, Archbishop Chris Cardone, who was gracious to give us his home for 6 weeks, would say that Americans are human doers, not human beings. And that the Solomon Islands, they've mastered the art of hanging around. You'll just see people scattered all over the place, just hang out in the shade. But they're being present to each other, and they don't need to be doing everything constantly. They find joy in that presence, and that was something that I had to learn, and it's something I think that we can all learn, and the importance of learning that, just because in whatever field you go into, you're always going to have human interactions, and you're going to want to be with those people in those moments. And if there's a beauty and graces in those moments, when I'm thankful I got to experience some of those. So that's the first point. We got to be human beings, right? Second point is practicing companionship. As you can see, lots of pictures are of us with youth. This is the bishop on the top. He's Dominican, but it's very hot, so he's not always in habit. He's seldom in habit. From 6:10 in the morning until about 6:40, he's in his habit, and that's about it. But we're in this middle picture with the bishop, that's his table on his veranda, and we spent about 3 weeks on that veranda after school, where we would just be. We would just hang out with these great youth. I'm cut off, but next to me is a great young gentleman named Hudson. Next to him is Peter II. There were 3 Peters. There's Peter the Rock, Peter II, who barely talked, and there's a third Peter who played, we called him Peter Jesus, because he played Jesus in their Easter pageant, Stations of the Cross, I think. I think he was Jesus in the Stations of the Cross. I call him Peter Jesus. And then there's Bishop, our friend Junior, and then Philip. Philip is an electrician. And then Peter standing in the middle, you see this little glass full of like lemon drink, which is, it's essentially just Tang, but we thought it was the greatest thing in the world because it was 90 degrees walking home from school, and we needed something to cheer us up. And there's a deck of Uno cards there, and we would just play Uno for hours. And we made these great friendships just playing cards. We didn't have to do anything. We didn't have to, entertain. We just would play cards and have conversation and teach them things, and they would teach us things and have great conversations. And a lot of these great conversations stemmed over on the left side. These are with our students. I was teaching, they asked me, what do you study at this Catholic school that we were teaching at called Bishop A. Paul's School. That was our project, essentially. We found that out when we got there. We had no way to plan for this. And I said, I study social work. And they're like, oh, it's great. Like, so it's like sociology. And I was like, no, not really. And they're like, you can teach social studies. I was like, okay. And they're like, how about urbanization? And I was like, sure. Like, yeah, like Industrial Revolution, I'm like, yeah, I know that stuff. Yeah, he's like, yeah, we don't know that stuff, so you can teach it that. I'm like, okay, I'll teach you that. But it was great. And I kind of had a little bit of a lesson plan for every class, and I would go in and do my best to teach my 43 boys and my 48 girls in 11th grade and give them a project to figure out what city life is like and what it means to be in an urbanized setting, because for them, it's really just a big town. And I could never really tell if they knew what I was talking about or if I was really even communicating well. But for them, it was just me being there. And I had a box for questions, at least for the girls. They were a little more shy. And I said, you can put questions in this box and I'll answer them at the end. I'm like, okay. So the first day, I leave the box in the classroom and I go back and it fills up with like 30 questions right away. And I was like, whoa, okay, I got work to do. But they were more interested in just me being there. And it was a bonus if I got to teach them anything. I think the gift that I was able to give was just to be with them, to spend time with them, to give them my attention, and to share my experiences and my knowledge with them, and to be open to their experiences and their knowledge, to learn more about what their culture is like and what their values are and the gifts they have. So that was great. And my last one is giving and receiving, so great segue. It was hard to give on our part. We came with like 8 Frisbees, which Dan will talk about, I'm sure. That was his idea. And we came with, my parents went to like the Statue of Liberty about 5 days before we left for the Solomon Islands for like my mom had a class trip. I said, oh cool, like we'll bring like little snow globes. I don't know what snow is. I was like, they'll probably get like a little kick out of it. So we show up and we have these, our 8 Frisbees and our like 6 snow globes. Okay, we've got to be careful how we distribute these because they got to be for like special people, right? But then, of course, you run out of those things and you're like, well, man, like I have all these great friends now and, what can I give? And they gave us so much. Like this shirt is from a priest who we spent a weekend with, and I maybe had a conversation of like 2 paragraphs worth of words, and that's it. And he met us at the airport the day we were leaving, and he gifted myself, and Dan has his as well, right before we got into the plane. And it's really, that was really kind. You don't have much, and you're giving from what you have, not from what you have extra. And then, it's a great thing to receive that gift. It's a great thing to receive this shell. It's called shell money. These necklaces made of shells from the sea. But you kind of feel this isn't a just transaction. I've got nothing else that I can give back to you. I'm receiving so much, but what am I giving? But I think in hindsight, I found peace with that because I realized like I've given a gift of my experience, my value, my presence to you, and you've given that same gift to me. And I can only hope that they derive as much joy from that as I derived from them. But the joy of presence leads to the ministry of presence, and that's something I'm trying to take back with me to PC and beyond, is being present to people and appreciating them in those moments, looking for those graces and those gifts, which I encourage you to do as well. And I hope that through our conversations we can do that together. And then my second theme is give your brother some toast. What does that mean? So it was I think our last Sunday, and we're with the bishop and we're getting ready for Mass, and he's going to do the 9 o'clock Mass, and we're making breakfast in his house, and he's got a toaster, and like our breakfast every day essentially was just like bread, like not even toasted, just like literally bread with like peanut butter and jelly, and maybe this weird like margarine / buttery thing that wasn't butter or margarine, it was something in between. Daniel ate it, I didn't eat it. That was literally our breakfast. And like we would go through like loaves of bread in one day because I call it the breakfast club. The altar servers from the 6:10 Mass would join us for breakfast, and then we'd all go off to school. But when it was Sunday, we could have toast because it was just us and the bishop. So we're making toast, and the toaster makes 2 pieces of bread at a time. And Daniel and I both want toast. So being an American, I make 2 pieces of bread, and then I give them both to Daniel out of like a charitable donation to my friend. And then Bishop, well, first Daniel accepts it. He's like, "Thank you for the toast." And then, in those exact words. And then the bishop looks at Daniel, and he's like, "Hey, get rid of your American individualism. Give your brother some toast." And Daniel's just like, "Okay, thanks, Dad." But in hindsight, that was one of the greatest lessons that we learned in this whole trip, at least for me. And it's come up in conversation really just in the past 2 days. It's helped me kind of process the meaning behind that. Where individualism gives way to brotherhood, right? Me just giving Daniel food and then me eating my food, right? And there's kind of 2 individuals just eating their food one at a time instead of us sharing. You know, it's this odd like act of building a community between toast. That sounds strange, but that was kind of like a small metaphor for what this big lesson. In the Solomon Islands, you really aren't alone at all. Like here, we want to have our space. We want to be individuals. You know, after class, you go back to your dorm room and you kind of hope your roommates aren't there, and you just want to hang out and like decompress for like a second. We could not do that, and nor did we want to. Once we were there long enough, those first few days were difficult because you're away from home, and it's hot, and you want to sleep. Because the sun has just drained you from all energy, but everyone just wants to be with you. Everyone's on Bishop's veranda waiting for you, and you can hear him from your bedroom window because it's just a mesh screen, and they're ready to play cards and have lemon drink and to hang out, and that's their way of living. There aren't individuals in the Solomon Islands. There are brothers, there are sisters. There's a community, and a lot of that comes from the way the family dynamics are, right? Let's come and jump to this last part. There's a system called the Wantalk system, which means one talk, which means like one language. You share a language. There's 41 native languages, and it's kind of based on the region you're from. And you help out your Wantalk. So for them, it's like you know your like 8th cousin as well as you know your own sister. I have no idea who my 8th cousin is. I have no idea I even have 8 cousins that far off. But for them, it's family, and it doesn't matter who you are, what you've done. What your hardship is, they're with you through that. I had a conversation with this one man on a ship on the way back from Maleta to Guadalcanal, and this is a big burly guy, and he's going to visit his son, and he's telling me, he's like, yeah, it's like, you know, I have this cousin of mine, he called me up and he said, I need $200 for a school fee, and so it's like, okay, yeah, he can give me $200, and then down the road he'll let me out another time, and that's just kind of how it is. Or if you want to get married, you all have to help contribute to pay the expenses for this wedding. And you keep track of everyone who paid you and everyone you're paying for so that they can help you out later. But what I'm trying to essentially say is that it's never like a one and done, a single transaction, or it's all about me. It's all about the other. It's all about your brother, your sister, your family. And we don't have that here, so it's very strange and difficult for us to understand. But that was a huge lesson to take away and to try to work on here. And so again, in those hardships, give way to a community. And on my second point, where solitude is broken into community, there were times when I would just want to be alone. I would want to journal. I would want to relax. I would want to sleep. This fellowship can be difficult and draining. And I just couldn't do it. People wanted us to be with them, and we wanted to be with them too. And then you realize you have 6 weeks to make these, you know, friendships and relationships that you don't want to waste. And that is facilitated by the pressure, and a good pressure, to be with people. You're not meant to go to the Solomon Islands if you want to be alone, or if you want to necessarily reflect on your own. You will go to the Solomon Islands if you want to be immersed in a community that loves you, that appreciates you, that will simply just say thank you for being there. And it's endearing in hindsight. It's difficult in the moment, but it's endearing in hindsight because you experience a love, you experience a friendship and a connection that you know you're always going to be welcome. And just a quick two examples, right? They both happen to do with Mass. Whenever we go to a church, a new church, or those first few times that we went to Mass together, the bishop or the priest will stop at the beginning of Mass and like point out people in the crowd. They'll be like welcome Lindsay Cholfi to the Smith Fellowship presentation. Welcome brothers Daniel and Tommy to our church. We're happy to have you. And we'd always be like, hey, like, this is weird. But then everyone turns and just like, yeah, like, what's up? How you doing? Welcome to our church. And they value that. And then when we were leaving in our last Mass, the bishop came up to the ambo at the end of Mass and said, we're bidding our brothers goodbye. Go shake their hand after Mass. And it's like, okay, so we're expecting people to come and say goodbye. But instead of saying goodbye, they say thank you. And these are complete strangers. We don't know who they are. But they say thank you. What did I do for you? Well, there was no previous interaction between the two of us. But in hindsight, it's like, just thank you for being here. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for taking time out of your life to spend time with us, to be in our community, for coming to the Solomon Islands. It's like, thank you guys. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this was a blessing and a gift for the both of us. But it's a place very foreign to us, not just by distance or culture, but by norm, by values, and interaction. Because for them, it's just very much they're gonna want you. If any of you guys go to the Solomon Islands, they're just gonna want you. They're gonna want you to be present, and they're gonna want you to share your toast. Those are pretty much my lessons and my themes. So I'll now hand it off to Daniel to share his.
So, for me, the fellowship was encapsulated by two phrases. There's actually going to be three, so I guess I lied right now. But the first one has to be Abandonment to Divine Providence. I picked up a book about 2 weeks prior to the fellowship by this title, Abandonment to Divine Providence. And it was very peculiar to me. It was something that kind of stood out to me. And I started reading it right before the fellowship, but then it was finals week and everything, and I was like, okay, it's relevant, and I think that this is what I'm going to read during the fellowship. So I did so, and it ended up being one of the biggest themes of the entire fellowship itself. So I kind of want to talk about a couple of things. First of all, what does it mean to abandon yourself to Providence? It was one of my blog posts that I wrote that it reminded me of this. And it was called The Grace of the Unplanned Day. Tommy and I had headed to the Dominican Friars residence about 15, 20 minutes by bus down the road from Archbishop Chris's residence for one weekend. And we were super excited just to spend the weekend in a completely different place and to spend it with the Dominican Friars community there. And earlier that week at school, some of the kids had asked us, they were like, are you going to go to the Legion of Mary retreat this Saturday? It's at the seminary. Are you going to be there? Are you going to be there? Are you going to be there? We're like, well, we're going to be kind of at another place. We're not really sure. I don't really think that we can go. But we're just like, but we don't actually think we have plans. So it's unclear as to whether or not we can actually go to this retreat. So, the weekend comes and everything. And we get there, and there is no plan. We're just hanging around with these friars, getting to know them. And Saturday comes around and we wake up, it's raining, which is weird. I mean, we thought it was going to be like, 95 and blistering heat. But nonetheless, we wake up, it's raining, and we don't have a plan. And it was odd. It was odd for the first time in probably years that I woke up on a Saturday morning and didn't have a plan. And it was uncomfortable, incredibly uncomfortable. And, I just remember just getting out of bed and just wandering over, to the chapel, wandering over to, the refectory where they were eating, and things just started flowing. We immediately just had breakfast with everyone in the community. We didn't really know if that was going to happen. Things were just kind of strung together, and things just kept on happening. After breakfast, again, nothing. We didn't know what we were going to do. And we ended up playing cards with like one of the altar servers that's 10 years old, and he's coming in and he just wants to play some cards. And then this other kid, he's like 3 years old. This kid over here, over to your right, he comes in. He just wants to play cards as well. And so we sit down, play cards for like an hour and a half with this French volunteer that was there that we got to know. And then after that, we took a break, and we were just kind of wandering. Just wandering, which is a typical Sullivan thing. You just wander, and things just come about. And so, I was wandering around, and I eventually befriended a parrot named Russell. If you've seen, there's a mock poster going around of my face with a parrot on my shoulder. He did bite me, and bit the rest of us. Yeah, there he is too. Yeah. So actually, it's quite an iconic photo too, because I'm in a Hawaiian shirt with a parrot on my shoulder playing cards with a 3-year-old. He didn't know what he was doing, by the way, so we were just playing a nonsense game. And that, I think, embodies abandonment to Providence. And I say that because in every single instance in which this happened, you were just radically present to whatever it was that was going on in front of you. When a 3-year-old wants to play cards that he doesn't have necessarily a game in mind, it's just him telling you, like putting a card in front of you and then you putting one card down, he's like, oh. And you're just like, yeah, I'm winning, right? It's just making stuff up on the spot. It is just absolutely radically present to those around you, because they just want you. And that was so hard as an American, as someone transitioning immediately from finals week and from the most stressful time of a college student's life to like loosey-goosey Sullivan style. That was a hard transition, but a beautiful lesson. A beautiful lesson. And the picture on the left is very funny because, this was our last evening mass. And that we went to at the cathedral. They had 2 masses, one in the morning, 6:10, and one in the evening, 6 p.m. And this was our last evening mass, so sometimes we would flow in between masses and things. But we went to this mass, and absolutely everybody was coming up to us afterwards. People that we did not really know were just coming up to us. They just wanted pictures. People were just like flowing in and out of this picture. There's probably like 10 of these pictures of no one looking at the camera, and completely different people. There was no plan whatsoever, which is hysterical. And again, another beautiful image of Providence. People just, again, want to know you, and they love you because you've come and spent time with them. And now, some of the people in the picture, they send us messages on Facebook just to say, "Good morning from Salo. Good morning from Salo. It is 6:25. And you're like, thank you for the time. It's incredibly beautiful, and that is the friendship that they have, and the friendship that they really cultivated in us. And then the middle picture is just our friend Brandon. We gave him the camera this one week that we were on a different island in a remote parish, and he was our guardian angel. And Bishop told him, "You're their guardian angel," so he was. He spent every minute with us, and we gave him the camera, and he just went wild. Absolutely wild across like this entire week. He was there's probably like 1,000 pictures on Tommy's phone that Brandon took of himself, of like other people, random instances. We're not really sure where he is in some of the pictures. So again, another instance of Providence. Second would be the phrase, "Jesus, I trust in you." And I want to focus, first, I want to explain the picture on the right. During that grace of an unplanned day, we eventually found out how to shave coconuts efficiently. And that was fantastic. We learned how to make coconut pudding. There were like 25 people making coconut pudding somewhere on this like Priory campus. And we just ran into them, and they were like, "Come cook with us." So we did. But I want to focus on the left picture. The picture on the left, rather. That is when I was receiving this necklace of shell money from my second graders. So when I was teaching theology for 4 weeks in the secondary school, and I had some more free time. And so I said, I kind of wanted to go to the elementary school. Never really taught kids or anything. And I was like, I wonder how this could be. And I was actually deeply afraid. I didn't know if they were going to like me. I didn't know if I had what it took to be an elementary school teacher. But I ended up going to these two classrooms, these second grade classrooms, where, again, I came in there, and I remember the very first time I came in, and I was expecting I had heard stories from Lindsay and Claire before about how awesome the kids are. They just love you automatically, right? So I go in there, I'm like, yeah, they're gonna love me, I'm awesome. I come in there and absolutely dead quiet. It's almost as if they're just shuddering at my presence there, right? And so, one girl comes up, her name was Celestka, and I was just do you have any questions? I come from the United States. I'm putting it on the map. I was like, it's far away. You must have questions. And this one girl comes up. She's shaking and she's asking a question, but the fans are on and my hearing's bad. And so I was like, yeah, definitely. Yeah, okay. And so that didn't help the cause. But then as I kept on going, and one of the teacher, Miss Lucy, she afterwards, she comes up to me and she's just like, you did great, they loved you. And I was like, that's not true. That is absolutely not true. They were not speaking to me. She's like, are you coming back next week? I was like, I guess. I'm here. So I come back the following week and things just explode. It was just questions that I asked. It was just me being silly. I played 3 hours in a row of Simon Says. I would ask them about animals. They loved animals. Animals was their favorite topic. So I'd ask them a whole bunch of questions about animals. And then they started shooting questions back at me. They're like, have you seen a polar bear? I'd be like, yeah, I've seen a polar bear. They're like, a cheetah. I was like, yeah. A goose. Yeah, I've seen a goose. And then one of them just looks at me and they're like, have you seen the devil? And I was like, it's no. Next question. And again, how does this relate to the phrase, Jesus, I trust in you? It relates to it in the sense that I walked into that classroom and I had no idea what I was doing. And these kids taught me something incredibly important, which was to just be. To be silly, to be fun, to ask stupid questions. That was what I needed to do. And that's all that they wanted. And then this ended with them presenting the shell money to me by this one kid, Galicia. He presented this shell money, and they were all around. you could not part the seas, right? And they would just take whatever it is that they had in their house, literally, and bring it in that day just to give to you. We got laundry detergent. And so I was opening this gift, and I opened it after receiving shell money, t-shirts, stuff like that. I was like, this is all so kind. Then I opened the package, it's laundry detergent. I was like, oh! And it was just so kind. It was they just went home on that Thursday night and said, I need something to give to Teacher Daniel and Teacher Tommy. And that's what it was. And so that's the lesson I would give on Jesus, I trust in you. Finally, Revelations in the Promised Land. Again, this goes along the lines of just being you. Tommy alluded to it earlier, but one of the biggest lessons that I learned throughout the fellowship was the fact that, and this was in a conversation that we had with a priest in the Diocese of Auki. They weren't interested in what you wanted to be. They weren't interested in what you were aspiring to be or anything like that. They were just interested in you. And so by the end of the fellowship, that was a resounding tone to me. To just be silly, to be you, to be everything that God has created you to be in this very moment, and to just love. To love them and to allow them to love you as the person that you are right then and there. So, of course, that made making faces in the left picture. Junior David loves that picture. That means Brandon taking Tommy's raincoat and pretending that, I don't really know what he's pretending. I think possibly, I have no idea actually. Who knows? Yeah, Navy SEAL. And using a broom as a gun, who knows? And then just going on an hour-and-a-half walk on this beach along this lagoon and just being silly and fun and picking up shells and pretending to be fighting with them and just being us. And so that's what I would say the Smith Fellowship really meant to me. It was an opportunity to really trust in God's own mercy, in God's own love, and see that in the reflection of these people who, they really show you the image that God has for you. And it's a beautiful reminder.
Thank you both. Thank you both so much. And so now we're going to transition to Grace Koontz's presentation. Grace did a little bit of a hybrid fellowship, so she's going to give you a little bit more information on what that looked like. All right, Grace.
All right. Hey, guys. Oh, slow. Okay. So my name's Grace, like Heidi said, and Tommy and Dan just did the best job ever describing the Solomon Islands to you guys. I'll focus a little bit more on my time in Sydney, but essentially, I spent a month in Sydney, Australia, living with a host family, the Randall family. They're awesome. I had 5 host siblings and 2 host parents, and we lived in Asheville, which is about like 15-minute train ride from the harbor and everything, which is great. And then I taught every day during the week at St. Lucy's School, run by Dominican Sisters. So that's a school for all kids with different special needs and disabilities. It originated as a school for the blind, and it's transformed over the years. It's the most incredible school institution I've been in my entire life. I can't say enough good things about it, but I'll describe some of my students a little bit more in a minute. But after my month in Sydney, I spent 2 weeks in the Solomon Islands. I was on a different island than Dan and Tommy. I was in Auki. They visited for a weekend for an ordination, which was cool. But I lived in a Dominican convent with these 2 sisters, Rebecca and Clasina. There was one more sister, Sister Loretta, who was my main point of contact in the Solomons. I got there, and a few days after I got there, I extended my stay to stay in Auki the entire time instead of going to where Dan and Tommy were staying. And after I switched my flight to stay longer, I found out Sister Loretta was leaving. So I actually wasn't really with her for that long, but those are the 3 sisters that I spent most of my time with in Auki. So it's very difficult for me to articulate my experience. If anybody's ever talked to me about this, you can vouch for me for that. But my time in Sydney and the Solomon Islands were just so different from each other that it's kind of hard for me to bridge them, I guess. It sounds contradictory, but throughout the 6 weeks in both places, I was able to experience a certain inconceivable joy and an authentic peace at the same time. It was truly incredible, and I can explain it a little bit better based on some of these pictures. But in Sydney, for example, at home, I was in a house with 7 people, myself, and 4 dogs. They're all giant dogs, too. So it was just a madhouse all of the time, completely chaotic, but so full of joy. And I would come home at the end of the day, and all of my host siblings would be there. They'd be ready to go out and do something. I'd have the dogs jumping on me and everything. My host mom would be in the kitchen, have so much food all over the place. Wouldn't let me help ever cook, but it was just always crazy. But I would get home so exhausted, and instead of wanting to retreat to my room and just go to sleep, I always wanted to just be present with this family, figure out what I could do around Ashfield or around Sydney, and there was like a sense of peace within me where everything around me was kind of crazy, but like I was so happy to be there and so grateful for the just like being able to be present with these people. It was really awesome. And then St. Lucy's, that was a lot. So I was in a classroom with 9 boys. My class was known for being the craziest in the whole school. So all 9 of these boys were somewhere on the autism spectrum, just beautifully unique individuals. I have never felt such a strong connection to like a group of kids ever in my life. Like I babysit, like I've been babysitting for years, and I've never felt a connection like this. Leaving them to go to the Solomons, I wasn't expecting it. It was like the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life. But they're really awesome. And so every day, like there were 4 adults, myself included, for these 9 kids, and it still was not enough. All the kids were very much like kind of in their own little worlds. They didn't really communicate with one another. So ideally, we would have had one-on-one student-teacher ratio, but we did what we could and had just like the best days. And so we would have like all of the kids like doing their own thing, and amidst all the loud noises and the climbing and the screaming and the touching things you're not supposed to be touching, like I was just like surrounded by all of that, and at the center of it was truly love. And these kids were still receiving the most incredible education, so much care from like all of the teachers there, all of the staff. I met like this one behavioral specialist named Monica, Miss Monica. She's like the most amazing woman I've met ever, and she cares for these children so much. She goes to school like twice a week, and she knows every single student in the school by name. She's so consistent with them, and she really kind of actually changed my life just from me sitting with her for about 10 minutes, like twice a week with a few kids around me, and like realize the type of person I want to be. And like no matter what I do after I graduate, which I have no idea what it will be, like I want to be like how she is in her field. And just the way she interacted with all of the students was insane. But again, I would be so exhausted. I'd take like an hour-and-a-half train ride home, and then have to walk from the train station to my host family. And I would be so tired, so drained from the day, but like at the center of it, like I felt so much peace and gratitude and love, and it was really great. So then in the Solomons, in that picture down at the bottom, that's Peter. He was like my like go-to in the Solomons. He took good care of me, and he would pretty much, he like kind of moved in with the sisters for the time that I was there. He was there all the time. Taught me so many dances. I have videos if you ever want to see them. You don't really want to see them, but I have them. And like he would teach me all these dances. We would do that every day, just on repeat. It would be like the same song would just play probably 45 times in a row. And then same with the sisters and I, like the 2 sisters, they asked me if like I could teach them an American dance, and I was like, I really cannot. I have no American dances for you. And eventually, the only song I had downloaded on my phone that has a dance to it was Cotton Eye Joe, so taught them that, and so every night they would ask to do that. So that was fun. They taught me a lot more than I taught them, but we would always do that, and the joy that was there, it was all about being present. I didn't have my phone, like, it wasn't working for the whole time I was there. I think I got on Wi-Fi maybe once the entire time. But it was awesome. I never was like wishing that I could be on my phone. I always wanted to be present. I needed to be present because unlike Tommy and Dan, I never was fluent in Pidgin, so I had to pay a lot of attention to what they were saying. So that's where the chaos kind of came in for me. But in the top right, you can see Our Lady of Fanulama Chapel. So that's where I stayed. Like the Dominican convent was on Our Lady of Fanulama's property. So that means Our Lady of Peace. In Fanulama, it means peace in one of the different tongues on the island of Malta. So that just like says a lot, I think. And every time I would walk by it, which was a few times a day, I would just think about like the peace that was surrounding me, and the joy that was surrounding me, and all of the people there. Dan and Tommy did such a good job of explaining the way that everybody's just present and everybody is good at just being, and there's a lot of joy involved there. So I encountered Jesus through like this joy and this peace. And I want to give you some like very specific examples of people I did that through. Here we have Maddy Steven. This is one of my kids in my class, and he is super, super awesome. He's a very unique kid. He, at St. Lucy's has uniforms. He was not about that, so he would wear this every single day. Only kid in this school to wear this. And so my first day, I come in, and he also has a cape that he normally wears, but we take it off when he's gonna eat, so it's not in these pictures. But so he goes by, like he speaks in third person, so he'll be like Maddy Steven this, Maddy Steven that, or Catboy. If he doesn't listen to you, you gotta call him Catboy, and it works sometimes. But my first day, it was like lunchtime, and the head teachers were like, okay, just go in, like most of them have like their food in their lunch boxes, but for Maddy Steven, can you go put tomato sauce on toast for him? And I was like, yeah, sure, okay. And like started walking, and I was like, wait, that's super weird. And I was like, what's like, and I was looking in the fridge for like tomato sauce like we're used to, and then I was like, what is that? And she was like, oh, it's like your ketchup. So I thought that was a weird Australian thing to put ketchup on toast. It's just a Matthew thing. But every day, like I would do that for him. Then towards the end of it, of like my 4 weeks there, he got like a lot more comfortable around me, and I would ask him to help me, and like that's him trying to do it by himself. And his OCD would get to him, and if there was like any gaps in it, he would like, I have the best video of him being like, you have to hide the hole, you have to hide the hole, and like just to see him grow like that, to be able to like do this independently was so awesome, because he wasn't doing that when I got there. And like the other thing that I saw kind of transform in him was him interacting with his classmates. So like in this picture on the far right, that would be like I would heat up like food for Patty there, and I would be like, okay, Matthew, can you bring this to him? And like that would be like the only time of the day that like the kids would interact, which was really great. But he was just great, and like one of the best moments with him was I've never like felt so much pride for like another person. One time, all of the kids were just practicing handwriting on like their smart boards, and every student in the class would like trace their name inside like these giant bubble letters. Maddy Steven, though, was like he's very advanced academically, so he didn't have the outline. The teachers were just like, okay, go write your name. But he didn't want to be different from the other kids, so he was just staying there, like being like, no, not doing it, very stubborn. And we were all like, no, you got to do it, you can do it, like you got this. And eventually he started like drawing these like big like lines like everywhere, and I was like, and the teachers were like so confused, they were getting kind of like frustrated with him, and then like right away I realized what he was doing, and he was like drawing bubble letters like so that he would still have the outline, and then he like drew all of that and then wrote his name inside of it, and like watching him do that, it was like, it's like such an awesome moment for me, like seeing how he had evolved from like the day that I got there, and like it was just really cool. He's just such a awesome little kid, and just like seeing the joy he had being able to do that for himself, and it was kind of like him being like, like I'm showing you, like I can actually like if I want to be the same as my classmates, I'm going to be. But it was really cool to see. And then another one of my students, this was my best friend when I was in Australia. This is Jibril. He is the biggest troublemaker I've met in my entire life. I'll just like explain these pictures. So the top left, they're all very cute pictures, but in that top left, he is actually not just like examining that, he's like turning it off to make Alex mad. So he would just keep turning off the screen every couple minutes. The top picture, I was like watching, I actually have a video of him playing that ukulele, and I was like, wow, that's really awesome. He's like playing it, it's so cute, and like the next day, the teachers came up to me and they're like, did you see like one of like what Jibby was playing with the ukulele, like it's broken. And I watched the video closer, and he was undoing all the strings in it. And then like, in the bottom left, that was when we went on a field trip, and I'll be honest, I lost him for about 5 minutes. It wasn't a big deal. It was fine, but he gets lost on every field trip, so someone was gonna lose him. Anyways, right? But that was him, and like I just had to I had to watch him like an actual hawk the whole time because he's a runner. And then in the right, that was again, like I could not let him let go of my hand. We were going like shopping, so we'd walk off of the campus of the school and go, and they would practice shopping, which was really cool. But it would really like give them like kind of see how independent each of them could be. And then at the bottom, that's him just like not getting up. So every day at recess, like the teachers would, they were like, "You're on JB today," like every single day they would say that, because I was the only one who was able to get him inside, but it would still take me about 20 minutes. So like I said, he's extremely difficult, and he would just like cling to whatever piece of like playground equipment he was on for like literally 20 minutes, and like nothing I'm saying is like doing anything. But as soon as I would like get him to like walk inside with me, I would normally have to like drag him, or he would be like attached to my leg, and this kid is heavy, very heavy, and like then he would just start singing like "We Wish You a Merry Christmas" to me, and then I was like, all right, I guess it's fine. But like it was really cute to see, like that was the way that he communicated, was like through physical touch and through singing songs, because he's never said, like we've never had a conversation before, but like watching him like become more comfortable around me and like be able to communicate with me, like not through like what we're used to as a conversation, was really cool to see. But like I see a lot of myself in him. I think that's why he was like my go-to. It was just because he would just laugh at everything, would not have to be funny, and if things weren't funny, he would make them funny. If someone was having a tantrum, he'd go up, wait for teachers not to be looking, and go poke them and run away. And then he'd start laughing. Teachers get so mad, and everybody else is screaming, but I'm like over there in the corner giggling, hoping the other teachers wouldn't look at me. But yeah, so Jimmy was awesome, and like I just saw like so much of like God in him, and same with Matthew, like seeing the joy and like the inner peace that they had, like that they held day to day, was incredible. Yeah, and then in the Solomons, like I said, I was on a different island than Dan and Tommy. I was in Aoki, and the spiritual zeal here was just absolutely incredible. In the bottom, you have sisters Rebecca, Feliciana, and Loretta, and like every day, like I said, we would dance and we would sing and we would eat such insane amounts of food. I cannot even explain to you. Like that's like after we ate and we still had all of that, and then we'd have that for breakfast and lunch the next day, and then cook again at night. But like we had so much fun together, and like even though at first like we were all kind of just. They're more reserved. I'm not, but I was in this situation because I didn't know like how, like I couldn't talk very fast, or else they wouldn't understand me. If they were talking fast, I couldn't always necessarily understand them. But we made it work eventually, and like got so close. And they are the most like loving women ever. They're so faithful, and they are the definition of like having servant hearts. They would do anything for anybody. And like just being able to spend time with them and learn from them was such a gift. So then in the top right, that's Bishop Chris that Dan and Tommy were talking about. That's who they stayed with. But he's like this guy from Long Island, and he's awesome. And he just like he's just like, I don't even know how to describe him, honestly. But he basically gave me like the coolest piece of kind of advice, but like also insight to the Solomons in like the 30 minutes that I had to talk to him while I was there. It was always super busy. He was there for like a weekend, performed 6 out of 7 sacraments in one day kind of deal. He was super busy. And then we both had a flight to Honiara where Dan and Tommy were staying. And on that flight, it was super loud. Like it was the smallest plane ever, and very, very close to the ocean the whole time. But I was talking to him just about like the differences of like going to school here and being so busy all of the time, and then coming to the Solomons where people really are just able to be present. And he gave me the advice. He was like, well, when you go back, like you need to be like John the Baptist. And he essentially meant like, basically like when I come back, to make everything about like God, make everything about him, and don't make things about you. And when I got back here, I realized like in the Solomon Islands, like I was surrounded by just a bunch of John the Baptist everywhere I was, because like they make ministry like part of everyday life, and it's never anything forced. It's never anything about themselves. It's never anything like a competition. It's really like them making things about Jesus and like how they can become closer to him as a community. So I learned a lot from them, or from Bishop, and then from all of the people I was with when I was staying there. But yeah, that's pretty much it, actually. I'm just so grateful for the experience, and just like I said a billion times, the joy and the peace that I experienced in both of these places was something really special. And being able to experience the church in the Dominicans, especially in another part of the world, was something I'll always be so grateful for. It was such a blessing. But yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Grace. I'm so struck by all the colors, especially on such a dreary day. So thank you all for bringing the colorful to us in this. So we have to take a quick minute to load Sophie's presentation. Please help yourself. There's snacks and drinks in the back still. And then we'll be back in 45 seconds. And so I will pass the mic off to her so she can explain the items that she's brought and also explain a little bit of what she learned and took away from her fellowship.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So I'm passing around some cloths that are called chitenges. You can unwrap them if you'd like, but what all the women would do is they always had to carry one with them, and you would tie it around your waist almost like a skirt. But they'd also use it to carry all the babies that were wrapped around their back on them. But you can open them up. Some are very Catholic, and then some are just very beautiful designs. And then there's a basket. There's a rhinoceros, and there's a stone. It was very common. There was the stone everywhere. And then there's a statue of the Nativity. That was a gift from the sister who I planned the fellowship with. And then I'm wearing a bracelet right now. It's copper. Indola is in the copper belt. So let me just see if I can play this. And this is just going to play in the back. It's just a slideshow, so I'm just going to be talking the whole time. And quick disclaimer, I had permission to take all the photos, so don't get scared. I had permission for all of them. Also, there's some kind of long videos in them, and there's one of an elephant pooping for 20 seconds. I did not take that. Someone else did. I did not realize until it was already in here. But anyway, so I was in Ndola, Zambia. I wish I had a map up there, but it's in kind of the real south of Africa. It's not quite at the tip like South Africa is, but it's real down there. And they have 76 languages there. Where I was in Ndola, they speak Bemba. And it was always funny to be there on the third day, the fourth day, the fifth day, and people would always ask me oh, do you speak Bemba yet? And I was no, I don't speak Bemba yet. And it was just ridiculous. They would ask me every single day, even the same person the next day, do you speak Bemba yet? No. But it was okay. And I learned some Bemba words. Mulishani is hello. And I don't remember the others. But there are others. There are many other words. Anyway, so I was there with Dominican missionary sisters, and they were incredibly welcoming when I got there, but it was very interesting. I was honestly kind of taken aback because they were not particularly interested in me in the sense that they weren't going to go out of their way to be inauthentic in any sort of way. They were going to be themselves. They didn't care if I liked them or not, which was very kind of strange to me at first because I think in America we're so into I have to make a good impression. They did not care. They were just themselves. There were some, I didn't even learn one of their names for 3 weeks, and then I finally learned her name. Anyway, so they have different ministries there. They have a hospital. The picture of that was kind of in the very beginning, but it's a mission hospital. It's actually it's run by the sisters, but the country of Zambia is the one who pays for it, and all the medicine there is free. So even if you're giving them the equivalent of a Tylenol, it's free. They also have a school for anyone who has special needs. I'm sorry, not a school, a home, and all of them are orphaned. They also have a girls' secondary school, so it's a high school, and it's actually the nicest school in Zambia. Like, it's like the top-rated school, and the sisters run it, so I thought that was pretty cool. Anyway, something that I really had to balance going over there was my expectations versus the reality. I didn't go over there with this mentality that I was gonna like do something wonderful or like help people like so much, but I definitely thought I'd help people a little bit more than I did. I got over there and they did not need me, like truly, they did not need me. And also I was qualified for nothing. I was there, really, I was qualified to make the beds and that was it. So that's what I did, I made the beds. But I was working in this hospital and I'd go there every morning and I'd like go to the nurse's bay and I'd ask like, do you need anything? And I'd be like, no. And I was like, okay. So I learned to always carry a book with me. I was reading JP2's, not Theology of the Body, Love and Responsibility while I was there. And there was one time that I was waiting for the doctor because I would follow him on his rounds as he would round on the patients. And I'm reading the book and I kind of got tired of reading the book. And so I put it down and I was like, okay, like I'll pray a rosary. And so I prayed the rosary and he still wasn't there. And this is like, we're now at an hour that I'd been waiting and just like sitting there. And I was like, okay, like I'll pray something else. So I started praying something else, and then eventually it got to the Divine Mercy Chaplet, and so I started saying the Divine Mercy Chaplet, and it was an hour and a half now, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna sing it. So it just progressed from me like doing one thing to the next and the next, and finally he arrived after 2 hours, and we go on rounds, and we go, and we're seeing the first patient, and he's saying like, okay, like she has diabetes, like blah blah blah. He like says some different things. I was like, okay, very interesting, and like I'm observing. I'm there to observe, and it gets to the point when like he's ready to walk away, and he says, okay, now explain to her like what she can and cannot eat, and what medication she's gonna be on. And I was like, what? Like I'm not a doctor, and he says, oh, but you know. And I was like, no, no, I don't. And I had to like really make it clear to them, like, I am not a doctor. But the thing is, I had to make it clear to them about every day. They really did not get it. They truly did not understand that I was not a doctor, that I had no skills. But anyway, after that patient, I kind of like, we moved on to the next, I thought, but he wasn't walking like to the next patient. He was just leaving. Like that was it. I had waited 2 hours to round on one patient. And I just remember being so upset and thinking like, why is this happening? Because that was kind of like the theme of every day, like having a plan and thinking like, this is what I'm gonna do, and then I'd get to it and it was not as I expected. And so in that sense, I really had to learn that like, it's okay if they don't need me to help. It's okay if they just need me to talk with somebody or sit with somebody or make the beds. And it was very lonely at times. It was very difficult. It was really hard to see suffering that I could not solve. There was a lot of suffering. But it was also not like the stereotypical idea. I think we think of Africa as this kind of suffering place, and it was not like that at all. There were many happy people. They did not have a lot, but some people did. There were the sisters. It was very interesting seeing their reactions to the suffering and how, at first, I was kind of off-put by it, like, why does this not move you more? But I guess it's because they live there. And they see it all the time. But anyway, it was really difficult to reconcile myself with that, as well as the idea of like privilege. So being over there, I would visit with children and I'd like ask them questions, and sometimes they would expect me to carry the conversation oh, I forgot to say, they spoke English. Like very, very well. So I could like speak with them perfectly. Their accents were kind of thick, and sometimes like, I remember this one time I was asking somebody to like repeat something. It's like, oh, can you say that one more time? And he said it again. And I was like, oh, just one more time. He said it again. And I was like, I'm so sorry again. And at that time I was like, okay, oh, like haha, like I laughed at him as if it was a joke. And he was waiting still. And I was like, oh my gosh, he expects a response. And I was like, I'm sorry, can you say it again? Because I just could not understand the accent. But they spoke perfect English. Anyway. I forgot what I was saying. I actually forget what I was saying. I was talking about speaking. Oh, the children expected me to carry the conversation. And so I'd sit there and sometimes I would have nothing left to say, but I'd always ask them like what they wanted to do when they grew up. And a lot of them would say like, I want to be a pilot, or I want to be an engineer, all these different things. And it was hard to hear that and think like, okay, like it's not impossible, but it is very unlikely that this child is going to be an engineer. And I started to feel like I didn't know what I was feeling. I just did not feel good about it. But I eventually kind of like came to the conclusion that like, my privilege was not something to be ashamed of. What would be ashamed, or what I should be ashamed of, is if I were to misuse it. But that was, I think, like a really big distinction for me, and something that I don't think we talk about here. I think we talk about it in the opposite way. It's just privilege is something to be ashamed of. But I disagree, and I think that's what I came to see. Oh, did it stop? I'll play it again. Anyway, so the hospital, what I would do there is I would make the beds, I would kind of see whatever they needed me to do. I'd go on rounds, I'd help the nurses, but I also did something called MCH. So I don't have a picture of MCH. Is it still not playing? Okay, so MCH was called Mother-Child Help, and it was kind of like almost like a little doctor's office just for women and children. And the women would come in, when they got pregnant, before they got pregnant, while they were pregnant, and after. So they'd bring their children for vaccinations as well. And it was really cool to be working in there. But every Thursday we'd go out on outreach. So we'd load into to one of the, I think it already passed, but there's like a picture of a kind of like a big truck. I think it was on the first picture. We'd load into there with all these medical supplies, and we'd go out into these villages, kind of like in a radius around the hospital. And we'd have to drive sometimes 45 minutes. And a 45-minute drive there, the people didn't have cars, so for them to walk to the hospital could be like 3 hours. And the first time I went to MCH, it was just astounding to think like, if you have a sick child and you know that the outreach isn't coming back for another month, you have to walk to the hospital. Or like if you go into labor, you have to walk to the hospital. No one's coming for a month. But it was really cool to be doing that, and to be kind of like seeing firsthand, like this isn't the city, this isn't the suburb, like this is the village. And there was nothing. A lot of times like there wasn't even roads anymore. But I loved doing the outreach. It really kind of helped me to confirm that like, yes, I do want to be a doctor. Like, yes, I do want to help people in this way. But that was kind of like what I did at the hospital. As far as with the sisters, I would wake up, I'd have meals with them, I'd pray with them. I loved having meals with them. I loved that because they would all joke with each other. And the first few weeks, I like couldn't get to their accents, so they'd be laughing. I would just laugh too because I didn't want to look stupid at the table. But I had no idea what they were saying sometimes. But I really loved doing dishes with them too. It was just a time when they were joking with each other, and I can still hear like each of their voices like saying my name in like distinct little ways. But they would also like adopt this certain voice whenever they talk about the high school girls that they taught, because most of them were teaching. Some of them were nurses, but most of them were teaching. And they would just make fun of the girls. Like sometimes it got like nasty. I was like, oh my goodness, sister, like, are you serious? And they would joke about these girls. And it was so funny hearing them joke with each other as well. They were just like not ashamed. Like they were truly sisters, and none of it was mean. It was just aggressive. I don't know how to describe it. One time, it was on St. Dominic's, like the feast day. It was really cool that I got to be there for that. I'll talk about it more in a second. But we were sitting at the table, and I was next to Sister Jessie, and she was a nurse. And we were just talking, and she would always tell me to stop playing with my hair at the table. I was like, oh, sorry. And then I'd like do it again 2 minutes later, and she'd say again, stop. But she was always like smiling, and she starts talking about like, oh, like you should cut your hair and stuff like this, and like she starts to like touch it and stuff. And I was like, oh, like I had my hair short one time. So she's like, oh, can I see it? And so I pull up a picture on my phone of like when it was short, and this was like when it was after my freshman year, so it was like 2.5 years ago, and it was a picture of me in Europe, and I show her this picture, and she takes the phone, she looks at it, and she says, you are fat here. And I said, oh, okay. And I said, sister, like I actually weigh more now. And she looks at it again, and she says, no, you are fat here. I was like, okay, thank you. But she wasn't, I mean, she wasn't being mean, she wasn't being sarcastic or funny, she was just telling the truth. But it was just very interesting, their humor and the way they would talk about things and talk to you. But they really did welcome me in, like, as a member of their community. The first week I was there, or not the first week, like the first, like, 3 or 4 days, they didn't, like, really do anything special. I was kind of, like, honestly a little disappointed. I was like, really? And then on Sunday, they had a welcoming ceremony for me. So we went into the chapel, and they gave me a shitange. They gave me, they didn't really give it to me like they said they were, but, like, they didn't. They gave me, like, this pot that, like, you make shima with. So in shima is kind of like their staple food, maize, like corn, like ground corn is their staple food. They eat it with every single meal. I didn't like it, but that's what you make it in, this pot, and it's really difficult because it's like it's almost like grits, but like ground super fine. But it takes a lot of power to stir it. This is the bad elephant video. Yeah, like I don't know who was filming that. There's nothing there. Oh, so she's making nshima right now. So she has a huge pot, and like you can see, like this is a huge pot, but like they gave me like a little pot to use. But anyway, like they were using an oar to stir that. Like it is hard. Anyway. So they had this welcoming ceremony for me, and they said, like, before you were a guest, now you are a sister, like, now you are home. And it made me feel really special, and they wrapped the shitange around my waist, and I spent the rest of the day in it. It was really funny, by the end of it, they were calling me Aspirant Sophie. An aspirant is someone who's trying to enter the Dominican order. And it was Sister Stefania's joke. She would constantly say this. And I just kind of like giggle and laugh, and you know, she'd say like, oh, you can put on the habit, and I was like, oh no, like it's okay. And then, you know, by the end of it was like, you can put on my black stockings too, like tell your family you're becoming one of us. I was like, oh no, that's okay. But they would joke about this all the time, and eventually I kind of realized like they didn't want me to leave. Like we became such good friends. They just kind of like really welcomed me in that sense. And eventually they were joking with me, you know, enough to say like, you are fat here. And they gave me Sister Maureen as my big sister. She's somewhere up in here, but she was the youngest of the sisters there, so they kind of like gave her as almost like, it kind of felt like a sorority, like your big sister, but it was not, obviously. But they gave her to me to kind of like have her watch over me a bit, and she really did. She was so nice, and we would cook together, like we'd bake, different things like that. But my favorite, or not, maybe perhaps not my favorite day, but one of my favorite days was the night before St. Dominic's feast day. And I came home from the hospital, I came home from the hospital for lunch, and they were like, oh, like, you have to go back for Mass. And I was like, oh, no, I went to Mass this morning. They were like, no, like, we're having another Mass. And they had just built an extra wing onto the hospital for a new pharmacy. And it was so cool to see that construction, and they did it so quickly. But I went to Mass at the pharmacy, and we were all in chairs, and all the hospital staff was there, and I was like, who's with the patient? I really have no idea who's with the patient. Everyone was there. So they were not monitored for like 3 hours. But we were having Mass, and the Masses there are so long because you sing everything. So we were singing and we were dancing, and we were just dripping. It was so hot, but it was winter there, and they would all bundle up in like coats and gloves and hats, and I was like, it is hot outside. But we were just sweating in there, and then we went to this barbecue afterwards, and you had to like it was like they'd give you raw chicken onto your plate, and then you'd have to roast it yourself, like on the grill. And I was like, okay, I'll do this. But after that, I was like, oh my goodness, like this is such a good day. And then I walked back to the convent, probably at like 8 o'clock at night or something. So I get back, and I remember like looking up at the stars, and it was just brilliant. Like you could see everything in the sky. Got to the gate, went in, I was just smiling, and then when I walked into the convent, there was just like all this activity, and they were preparing the house for the next day. They were preparing the house for the feast day. And it felt like the night before a holiday, like the night before Christmas, the night before Easter. And it was so much fun. Like we were cleaning, and I couldn't stop smiling, because I knew like we weren't going to bed anytime soon, because normally they go to bed at like 9 and you get 12 hours of sleep. And that's what I did. But we were not going to bed early that night. We were gonna bake cakes and cook for the next day so that everything was prepared. And I just remember that night, like, I was eating bamboo, like you can see it right up there. But it was just like the moment where I knew, like, this is a home for me. And it was just a really profound moment of feeling like I belonged there. I don't know where I am on time, but like there's so many stories I could tell. I brought them chocolate from America, and I was like, oh, I don't know if they'll have chocolate there. Stupid me, like, of course they had chocolate there, like they had grocery stores. But I brought them like a bag full of like Hershey's and like Reese's, all these different things. It got to like the second day there, and I ate it all myself. I just cracked. I couldn't not eat it. So they never saw the chocolate. I ate it for all 6 weeks that I was there on my own. I loved making the bed, so I'm going to quickly tell a story. Where am I on time? You got like 3 minutes. Okay. So I was making the beds, and this was the first time I was doing it. So I thought like, oh, I'm just gonna like make beds like normal, and I realized I did not know how to make beds very quickly, or at least hospital beds. But I went to this man in this bed, and normally like you could kind of like make eye contact, and some of the older people wouldn't speak English. It was really the younger people who did, and kind of like showed them like the bed sheets, and they'd get out of bed. But there was this man there, and he was dirty. He was very old. And he wanted me to make his bed, but he couldn't get out of bed on his own. I had to like help him get out, and I did not want to help him. I did not want to have to touch him. And I mean, this whole time as I'm thinking through this, I was like very ashamed of myself. I was like, oh my gosh, like this is what I'm here to do, and I couldn't do it. I did not, and I had gloves on. You know, like there was no reason for me to not do it, but I didn't want to. And I tried to kind of like make excuses of like why I couldn't do it. And then another woman walked over to help me. And so she helps me get him out of bed. And I loved making the beds. It was so like methodical. You know, I'd take off the sheets. I'd like kind of like sweep everything off the bed. There were often like crumbs, and like there's a lot of stuff on the beds. And then I'd, you know, put the new sheets down. I'd make like hospital corners, like very neat. And then I helped him back into the bed. But I just remember like going on to the next patient, going on to the next bed, and I like looked back at him, and he was in the same position he had been before, but I like for the first time like realized like why I was there, and it was to see like the other as Christ, and I really saw him, and it was as if I was seeing Jesus, and from then on I saw everyone differently. I saw every person I met as Jesus, and it really became an experience of like kind of doing nothing, like really not contributing much, but being there and making everything a prayer, making everything something meaningful, and just knowing like, I don't know why you want me here, but I know you want me here right now, and appreciating it for whatever it was. So that was really big for me. I had incredible conversations with people. I learned so much. I talk a lot about how I have become comfortable with being uncomfortable. There was a lot of uncomfortable things about this. There were a lot of hard times, a lot of loneliness, but a lot of great times, a lot of joy. I was with my best friend, Chumba, and we went to Victoria Falls together. You probably saw a lot of those pictures, but it was the most beautiful place I've ever been. And I just know that like I have to go back. Everyone as I was leaving was asking like, when are you coming back? When are you coming back? I was like, I have no idea. But I knew that I had to go back. I had to go back, not even to help, but just to be with them again, because I really made a home there. And to me, the Smith Fellowship isn't just about going to serve, it's going there to be with the people. And to know those Dominicans and to make them a part of your family. So that was my fellowship.
So thank you all for being with us tonight. This is just a few of the many stories that I'm sure they could all tell you. They're going to be unpacking their journeys for a very, very long time. And we have a few more presentations tomorrow Jack Murphy, Julia Gaffney, Emily Asherle, and Luciana Borelli will be giving their presentations tomorrow, same time, same place, if you're interested. And if you're interested in going on a fellowship or applying for a fellowship yourself, next Tuesday at 7 here and next Wednesday at 9 p.m., we'll have the information sessions where you'll get more information and the application there as well. But at least for now, thank you for being with us. Thank you to these four for sharing their stories. And have a great night. Retreat. And to begin with, we're going to have Jack Murphy give his experiences in Nicaragua.
All right, so like Heidi said, my name is Jack Murphy. I'm a junior. I'm studying social work and Spanish, and I spent 6 weeks this summer on the Smith Fellowship in Rivas, Nicaragua. So I guess I went down there to teach English at a school that was run by the Dominican friars. It's called Santo Domingo de Guzman, which means St. Dominic of Guzman, as we say here. So I guess I'll start with a story from about 4 weeks into my fellowship, so I had like 2 weeks left. So it was a Wednesday afternoon, and it was during exam week. So all the teachers were just left grading papers, all the kids had gone home. And then out of the blue, the church bells started ringing downtown, which is super weird because usually church bells only ring on a Sunday morning. So I asked my host dad, who was correcting papers next to me, what was happening. And he said that traditionally, when church bells ring just out of the blue, it means that the city's under attack. So I was just like super confused, like I had no idea what was going on. And then the principal came in and immediately dismissed all the teachers on the spot and said like everyone's free to go home. So then immediately there's like a lot of panic, like teachers that got up, that got on their motorcycles, drove home, and other teachers walked home to look closer. And my host dad was like gonna get on the motorcycle with me and drive me home. But then one of the teachers was having a panic attack, and he asked what was happening. And one of her daughters was like out on the streets and didn't have a cell phone with her. So my host dad, being the really incredibly brave man that he is, went out to look for her daughter on his motorcycle. So I was left at the school. It was just me and like 10 other teachers, and apparently the city was being attacked. So we were just staying in the school. There was one of the friars was there, Father Fernando, and he was just pacing back and forth in the hallway, not talking to anyone. He was like visibly like shaking. I was like super scared, and I was also like had no idea what was going on. So I went to go peek outside to see like what was going on in the street, but then immediately one of the teachers yelled at me like what are you doing? Get out of the doorway! There's gonna be bullets flying through the school. So like I obviously like, ran straight back inside the school. Luckily my host dad came like a couple minutes later with the girl, and then we drove home. On the way home, someone told me to put my backpack on my chest in case people fired bullets at us, that the books in my backpack could stop the bullets. So we got home, like it was a false alarm. Like there were a couple people like injured outside the city, and that's why they were ringing the church bells. But like unfortunately, I guess like the sad like reality is that that's actually something that's happened in other cities in Nicaragua over the past couple months. So starting on April 19th, there have been like really huge protests against the president there. And that's something that's kind of just overshadowed my whole fellowship. So if you go to the next slide. So I was supposed to go down on May 28th, and 12 hours before I was supposed to go to the airport, Father Carlos sent me a text saying it'd be best if I postponed my trip for 2 weeks because it was impossible for the friars to get to the airport to pick me up. And this was because one of the main forms of protest that people do against the president is putting up roadblocks. So it was impossible for the friars to get to the capital city, to the airport, because of all the protests that were going on. So luckily I was able to like rearrange plans, and I was able to fly into Costa Rica the next day and take a couple buses up to Nicaragua. But this is just like something that was just like always present there was always just some kind of like tension with the people there, and I think it also made all of my connections with people that much stronger during my time there, just because I knew this conflict was going on and they just had that anxiety just with them the whole time while I was there. This is a picture right outside. So I lived with the Dominicans the first couple days there, and this is the wall. This is at the front door looking outside at a wall across the street, and this says "Muerte al Sandinismo, Danielismo." So this is the political party of the president. So like people are very much like almost every like plain wall is like spray painted with something against the president. Because so what's been happening is that people have been protesting against the president because he's been in office since 2006, and he's made his wife the vice president, and he got rid of term limits so he can just serve indefinitely, and it just turned into like a dictatorship. So people have been protesting, but unfortunately the government forces have also been killing a lot of people at the protests. So while I was there, about 300 people were killed. So obviously people are like trying to speak up as much as possible without putting their lives at risk. So this was the first community that I came in contact with in Nicaragua. These are the three friars. This is Father Carlos. He was the principal at the school where I was teaching. This is Father Fernando. He taught at the school, and he also runs a supermarket. Apparently, because the friars work with a lot of poor people there, in order to keep their community financially afloat, they have like a supermarket that gets money for the community. And then this is Father Carlos, and he is the president of a local university run by the Dominicans also. It's for agriculture. So I was only with them the first couple of days. And then I asked, so before the trip had happened, I had asked Father Carlos if I could live with a host family, because I'd already lived in the past. So before, after high school, I spent 9 months in Paraguay, so I lived with the priests there. So I'd asked to live with a host family this time, so I'd have like a different experience. So this is my host brother, Daniel. He is 15, and he's in 9th grade. And then this is my host dad, Jose Ramon, and he's 45. So Jose Ramon teaches at the school where I was teaching, and then Daniel is a 9th grader there. And this was like definitely like the main experience of community that I had, obviously, while I was there, because I lived with them. I shared all my meals with them. So here's the house that we lived in. It's about, I think it was about like 15 feet by 15 feet. So we obviously didn't have much like physical separation. It was like very simple living. Here's like the living room. This is us watching the World Cup. This is like our dining room table that we ate all our meals at. One of the things I realized while I was there is that like all the walls are just like this. So like everyone has like their own cubicle for their room, but like whenever you make a sound in the house, everyone else was gonna hear it. So it was kind of annoying at times too, because like if my host dad stayed up correcting papers till like 1 in the morning and had his music blaring, like everyone would be up till 1 in the morning. But like something that was also good out of that, I realized like there was never a time during those 6 weeks where I ever felt lonely, because I was just, obviously there's a physical closeness, but also just like, you just kind of feel like a communal closeness, just, you're literally sharing everything you had with the other 2 people that lived in your house. So that was something that I found extremely fulfilling of living this like stripped down human experience, was just the feeling of just constant community, never feeling really alone while I was there. Here's my bedroom. I was kind of like taken aback when I walked in for the first time, because it was literally just 4 concrete walls and then a bed. So I lived out of my suitcase for the 6 weeks while I was there, and then they also bought me a fan. But like I said, like I never felt like I was like missing out on anything not having like furniture in my room. This is where I did all my laundry. I tried to do it like as little as possible, because it took me a couple hours to wash everything by hand. And sometimes while I was doing laundry, there would be a bunch of wildlife in the neighborhood that would walk by. So a lot of the people who live in the neighborhood are like farmers. So they've come from the farmlands and they still have their farm animals. So there's always like, even though it's like a pretty suburban neighborhood, there'll still be little chickens and pigs that run by all the time. So one time in our house, a little piglet ran through while we were eating dinner, just because we left the door open. I think that also just goes to show like, just the way that even things like, I don't know, just like random like animals that are in the neighborhood are also kind of like welcomed into the house. Like doors always open. And I think people are just so willing to share the little that they have. Here's another animal that was in our house. I got to go to the bathroom one night, and luckily I had my flashlight on, and I almost stepped on this huge toad that was in my bedroom. And so the next day I asked my host dad, I was like, do you want to do something about getting rid of the toads? He's like, no, because there'd be way more mosquitoes if we didn't have the toads. So we had a bunch of toads and geckos always in the house too. And then, yeah, here's our kitchen. We just had like a little gas stove and then a little area there for washing the dishes. The water would cut out for like, usually like 6 hours a day at random points. So we'd always have this, like just like a tub of water always filled. In case we didn't have any water, then we'd just use that to wash the dishes. So here is my English class. I don't know if this video is going to work, but so while I was there, I taught between grades 5 and 11. So I was supposed to teach the whole 6 weeks while I was there, but 2 of the weeks there was no gas in Rivas because of the protests that were going on. So there was no gasoline arriving. So for 2 of the weeks, I actually just kind of sat at home, just sharing with my host family. But for like 4 of the weeks I did get to teach classes. And if this video works, this will be kind of like how most of my classes went.
It won't let me do it without access.
Do you know how we get access?
You'd have to give it to me through your Google Drive.
I would do it at the end. Okay, we can come back to these. All right. So then another community that I got really involved in there was the baseball team. So the teachers at the school had a baseball team, and it was actually like a really funny community too, because all of them were like, most of the team was like 45-year-old overweight men. So obviously they had like a lot of really funny moments on the team where people would like fall down or like miss a really easy pop fly or something. And I think with this team especially, I felt really privileged to kind of share in that friendship with them, especially because of like the political conflict that was going on at the time while I was there. Just because I knew that they were opening up and befriending me, in spite of like the greater political anxiety that was going on at that time, and knowing that hundreds of people were being killed in those days while I was there. So like when we'd go out and like drink beer after the game, I just felt like that much more privileged to be in their presence, just because I knew how much they must be going through. I knew how much, just how much they just care about their country and care about me to just open up their lives and share with me. This is the team after our last game. We beat the high school seniors at the school. So that was definitely the most contested game of the year. And then, so this is one day I went farming while I was there. During the, this was during the 2 weeks where we had no school. My host brother asked me to go farming with his stepdad. And just since I would have probably stayed at home and watched Adam Sandler movies the whole day, because that's what was on the TV, I decided to go farming instead. So we planted plantains. So what we do is that we fill up this with like, they're like little balls of roots, and we fill up that with like a couple hundred root balls, and then the horse would pull them over to the field. And you go to the next slide, you can see the field. So we'd put in like 1 root ball every like 2 steps, and then people behind us would go and cover it with their shovels. And a bunch of people ask me when they see this photo, like, how did you get so dirty and how did all of them stay so clean?
How?
Yeah, so it was because, so I was carrying it like this, but somehow all of them that are like farmers can carry like all of them between their fingers, they can carry like 10 at a time. Whereas like my fingers weren't strong enough, and I also like felt like I was gonna rip the skin off. So I had to carry it like this. And I never got that shirt clean, obviously, because I had to hand wash it. So it's still like very brown. It's in my drawer at home. I don't think I'll ever wear it again. Yeah, so this is, I guess this is probably like my best friend, my host dad, while I was there, Moncho. And I guess just to end, I just want to like share some like words of wisdom that he shared with me. So one night we've been watching the news, and the news is always like really gory there, obviously. Like here in the United States, I think they usually try to, they try to not show, like I don't think they generally don't show bodies on the news. But they're very like sensationalist, so they'll show whatever will get like the most views. So like you literally see like bodies with their heads blown off, like bullets through people's chests. And it was like very haunting, like seeing that. Although like I never saw any of that personally in the city where I was, just knowing that was like 50 miles to the north in the capital city that all that was going on. So one of the nights after watching the news, like he turned it off, and then we were like quiet for a couple minutes. And then he had said like before you go back to the United States, I just want you to know that like Nicaragua is not like a violent country, and we're not like a violent people. It's just people that are like very much on the extremes that are so convinced that their ideology is like the only right way to see things. Those are the only people that really want to do violence. And there's a huge group of people in the middle that want peace. So I think that's definitely something that I'll try to take with me as I move on with my life, that I should never be convinced so much that the way I do things is correct, to an extent that I can't even see another person as like a human, that I see them as like an idea. So I think just going forward with that kind of intentionality of peace, and seeing others first as humans and as people that are like me, rather than seeing them as something that's different than me. And just like a big thank you to Heidi and Bob and Father Provarnik and like everyone who made the fellowship possible. And yeah, for letting me go especially. And thank you. So this is just like my normal English class.
Your favorite class? Eso.
Pardon me, but what grade are these?
So these are 7th graders.
Yeah.
So the question is, what is your favorite class?
My favorite class is B. What is your favorite class?
My favorite class is science. What
Espera.
What is your favorite class?
My favorite class is B.
Después.
What is your favorite class?
My favorite class is chemistry.
Chemistry, not chemistry. Chemistry.
What is your favorite class?
My favorite class is Spanish.
So kind of my philosophy of like teaching was kind of like, even though they might not remember like what I taught them, because they're not going to have like a supplementary English teacher while they're there. I think like ideally at least they'll be less fearful of speaking in public. If they can speak English in front of their peers, they'll be like that much more willing to speak Spanish in front of their peers. And then the other one's just like a fun video.
Dos, tres. Head, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes. Head, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes. Eyes and ears and mouth and nose. Head, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes. Más rápido, más rápido. Head, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes. Head, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes. Eyes and ears and mouth and nose. Head, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes.
actually, in front of like 800 people while I was there. At one of the school assemblies, it was supposed to be, it was the International Parents' Day. So I sang Danny Boy, which is like an Irish song about a father who's leaving his son in Ireland. So I sang that song. I don't think anyone understood any of the words, but that was the only other English song. They taught me a bunch of Spanish songs.
Nice. I bet they loved it.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Jack. Jack has a peer ministry meeting, so we volunteered to go first. But next, we're going to hear from Emily and. Oh, no, it's okay. You can go. It's up to you guys. Okay. Next, we're going to hear from Emily and Julia, who are also in a Spanish-speaking country, but a little bit further south. What?
I was setting up, so, okay. We've done this together a lot because we've had to teach like classes together all the time, so this is oddly familiar.
Yeah, this is deja vu right now.
Yeah. Okay, so hi everyone. I'm Julia Gaffney. I'm an English literature major, Spanish minor. I'm a junior.
And I'm Emily. I'm a political science and Spanish double major and a Latin American studies minor. And I'm also a junior.
So we went to Tucumán, Argentina, and yeah, we're just going to tell you a little bit about what we did generally, and then one moment from each of us that was really impactful.
Yeah, so this is the city that we stayed, San Miguel de Tucumán. So it's the capital city of the Tucumán province, which was where we were staying, and it's the smallest province in Argentina, and it's up here in like the northwest of the country. So this big building here is La Casa Gobierno. So this is like the big government building, and then this is the cathedral, and those are kind of like perpendicular to each other. So this is like where the big like town square is, and then those are situated next to each other. And this is another picture of like the main plaza.
Okay, so when we were there, we were teaching English. We taught at 3 different schools primarily. One was Los Pinos, that's a public school in a suburb called Yerba Buena, near the city. We also taught in a private school called Santa Rosa, which had 2 locations, one in the city and also one in Yerba Buena. And then we were in the mountains for a week, that far picture, teaching in a community called Chascadil, and that is an isolated community in the mountains, and we taught at a little schoolhouse there for 4 days.
Yeah,
4 days. Okay, so that's just a general overview of what we did, and I chose for my most impactful time of the fellowship probably to talk about the mountains. So we were around we were in a pretty comfortable lifestyle in the city. The private school was really beautiful, and we were there for the majority of the time, and we encountered poverty at certain times, but it definitely was not present throughout our entire fellowship. But one opportunity that we did get to encounter a whole different reality was when we went to the mountains. It was definitely the hardest week of my life, no doubt about that. We left very early on a Sunday, we got up middle of the night, and the trip into the mountains was very, very long. We took a tractor 3 hours into the mountains, which was terrifying, and then we rode horseback 4 more hours till we got to Chascadil. So that was very strenuous and very long. And when we got there, it was literally this, I don't have a picture of it, but it was this very, very tiny schoolhouse, two main areas and then a few rooms to sleep in. And it was astounding how different it was from the private school. It was not equipped. The classrooms were barely classrooms. The teachers who teach there are paid by the government to live up at the school because it takes too long to get there. And so they're a very close-knit community, but it's also they're away from their homes for 3 weeks out of a month. So it's very difficult for them. And then the community itself is very impoverished. That's spread out throughout the area in the mountains. So if you're standing at one house or compound, I guess. It was multiple houses, like a family would live all together. You couldn't see another one. They were miles from each other, so kids had to walk hours to get to school every day. It was just a very startling reality. So these were our students. They were, in my opinion, they were the smartest students we taught because they were the most hungry to learn, because they don't have a lot of other things to do when they're in the mountains. So school is so big for them, and for us to be there was huge because a lot of them do not know English. So probably the most impactful moment of the fellowship for me, if I had to pinpoint one, was when we were in the mountains, and it was a very long week. We had no communication with the outside world at all, so it was tough for us to be not able to talk to our loved ones and also have to deal with encountering very difficult situations, very sad situations a lot of the time. So throughout the fellowship, I think I was looking for like one big reveal as to why I should be on this, and I hadn't really gotten it yet. And I wouldn't say that I got like one big aha moment, but it came almost in like small moments, and one of those moments was one night when we were in the mountains. These 4 girls, they lived too far from home to walk to school every day, so they live at the schoolhouse during the week, and then they go home on weekends. So we, instead of hanging out with the teachers like we usually do at night, we hung out with them. I drew pictures, colored pictures with Judy. She's on the far picture, and we just spent time with the girls. They taught us dances, traditional dances, and we just spent an evening with them. It was super simple. We talked as much as we could with our limited Spanish, and just got to know them. And honestly, that was one of the best nights of the fellowship because they have absolutely nothing, and we were very much in their life. It's a moment where we really got to know each other as people, and it was very, very special. And I'll remember that night for the rest of my life. So that was my big fellowship moment, probably. And yeah, and that's us with all of our kids in the mountains.
So what I kind of wanted to talk about with my experience with the fellowship was kind of my approach going in, and then how I saw that grow. So going into the fellowship and applying, I knew we were going to be teaching English, and I feel like that's a very easy way for us to describe to people what we did. It's easy to sum up in a couple of words, just saying oh, we were English teachers, we went to a Latin American country, and that's what we did. But I also feel like that's the most untrue way to describe what we truly did, because going into this experience, we neither of us had teaching experience, and we really went in just kind of ready to see what they wanted from us and not really sure what that was going to be. And for me, as someone who has been involved in doing service before, in the Providence college community and back when I was in high school too, I think that was something very startling for me, having to approach service in a different way. And I think what I took away overall from my experience was that service isn't something you go out and do, and it's not necessarily about what you can offer, but it's about living a life based in service and allowing it to be a mutual experience as well. So I'm just gonna go through and talk about a few little examples of that I saw. And the first was the sisters that we were living with. I was really amazed by the lives that these sisters live because they all do very different things, but they're all very integral to the community in Tucumán that they're a part of. Something I remember was, so our dining room table is here, and then over here you can't see it, but they had a little desk and a whiteboard, and every day the sisters would have what they were what their schedule was for the day on there. So at lunch, if some of the sisters were out doing something else, everyone would look over there and be oh yeah, this is where Marita Carmen is, or no, Marita Carmen was always at home because she was the oldest sister. But if one of the other sisters was out doing something, and then our schedule also got posted up there, our teaching schedule, and I just thought that was kind of very symbolic of just how dedicated they were, that they lived in this community and they all came back to this community every night, but they were all like very active outside of the community, and that was something I had never experienced before with sisters. And it was just very cool. Like some of them were professors, some of them teach at schools, and one of the sisters, Molly, is very dedicated to working against human trafficking, which is like a particularly big problem in Latin America. So that they were all just very beautiful examples of living lives of service, like in the most like profound way possible. And so these are some pictures from a trip we went to a community called La Soledad that we went to with the high school students of Santa Rosa. So this is a rural community outside of the city, and I was very impressed when we went there seeing the high school students so dedicated and so active to this service that they were a part of. So here, this is the playground. So this was kind of like the center of the community. There's a playground, there's a chapel, and like another small building. And what they were doing here for their service project that we went with them was this clothing sale. So twice a year they have a clothing sale where they gather up a lot of donations from like their families and just everyone in the school. And they go and they sell them. And they explained to us like that the reason they don't just give away like the clothing is so that it is something that the people value, so that they feel like they have to contribute something to this in order to get and be like careful with what they're deciding to get for their families. But this might be the only opportunity they have to get new clothing during the year. So while we were there, before we actually had the clothing sale, I went with 2 high school students, and they do home visits while they're there. So this was similar to a lesser extent to our experience in the mountains, where the houses are spread out to a lesser extent. But we went to a few different houses, and something that really impressed me was just the maturity of these high schoolers who were involved in this service, just the amount of like respect they were able to show to the people in these homes, and just the way they approached it with so much love and also like a lot of joy. Because for me, like this was a very like sad and moving experience, seeing like the very simple conditions in which these kids were living. But for them, for the high schoolers who had gone back there several times, who knew these people very well, they were able to approach the situation with so much joy, and that was just very, very moving to me to see. And so one final thing I wanted to talk about was something I got the opportunity to do with one of the sisters, Hermana Gladys. She was a professor, but she's now retired, so what she does with her time is a prison ministry. And so I'm studying political science, and I would like to go to law school one day. So when I was applying for the fellowship, I saw that the sisters were involved in prison ministry, and I just kind of thought like, oh, that would be like a good experience to have, like that might be like very interesting. But for the first 2 weeks we were there, I didn't have the opportunity to go because we were just getting adjusted to our teaching schedule. And then one day Gladys came up to me and she was like, oh, like we're gonna sit down and talk because you need to get prepared to go to the prison with me. And I was very taken aback because I had almost forgotten that this was something that I was planning on doing, and I was terrified. Like I had absolutely no idea what I was going to be doing there. At this point, I still felt like very like not confident in my Spanish. And she explained to me like we would be doing like a craft with them, we would be making dolls, and then we would just be sitting and talking. And that just seemed like the most terrifying thing in the world to me. I didn't know what I was going to say to these women. We were going to a women's prison, and I just remember like we had classes in the morning, and then we went back to our rooms after lunch for our siesta, and just like thinking over like what am I going to be doing here? What is the purpose of me going to this? And I went with Gladys and 2 other women who go to the prison ministry with her, and I just remember going through, and it was very minimal security. They like took our ID and any keys we had, and they were like, okay, yeah, you can go ahead in. So we sat in this little courtyard, and then slowly like a few women came up to us, and at first I was just very quiet, but then they were like asking who are you, like, and I was like introducing myself, like very shaky Spanish. I remember getting signed in by the guards, and I had to like spell my name for them in Spanish, and I couldn't even remember like the alphabet in Spanish, but I remember just going in there and then just slowly like starting to talk to these women, and just, I think partially because of my fear, just of like speaking, I was able to somehow approach the situation very like naturally, in the sense that I didn't see them as any different from myself or from like the other people who I had met thus far in Argentina, even though these people led very different lives from like the mostly privileged people who I had been spending time with. And I think like that moment of grace, and then getting to speak with Gladys, who does this all the time, like really like gave me a different perspective. And something she said to me that like I think about all the time now is that for her, when she's doing the prison ministry, she's not just thinking about bringing Christ to those who are imprisoned in the sense of doing like that like corporal work of mercy, like going and visiting the imprisoned, but she's finding Christ in each of them, and they offer so much to her life. And that was just a really beautiful statement that I think really, really summed up that experience, and just like how we should approach service in general as just a very human interaction, not something that we're doing that's out of the ordinary, even though this was a really out of the ordinary experience for us. Like going to Argentina, going to a foreign country is not something typical, but I think it offers us something that we can just bring to our daily lives, and it was really beautiful for us. Yeah. And these are just more pictures. Our students or the teachers we taught with, but yeah.
Thank you, ladies. Beautiful. And finally, last but certainly not least, we have Luciana, who is in South Africa. She was in Montebello, which means beautiful mountain, and she can tell you more about that. But Luciana was in South Africa while everyone else was in Latin America. And where's the South America? South Africa.
Yeah.
Luciana, how do you want
You could actually just put it on the main page. Yeah. You can scroll down like a little bit. Yeah, that's good. Okay. Hi, I'm Luciana, and I'm a junior, and I just wanted to start it off with like a short exercise. If everyone could just close their eyes for a moment. Take a really deep breath and hold it for like 3 seconds. Go ahead, let that go. Drop that. Keep your eyes closed and just find what brings you peace. If it's someone or something, feel the warmth of that image. Okay, you can open your eyes. So before the fellowship, that was honestly something I couldn't do. And like, the fellowship came at such a special point in my life for me. I come from a very traditionally Catholic family. And I always felt this disconnect with my own spirituality that I couldn't quite understand. I couldn't quite grasp like why it was so easy for my family to, love God and be passionate about something like their religion as much as they were, but like I couldn't really connect that piece. So a year before the fellowship, exactly in May/June of 2017, I did a Maymester in Ghana, and I had an experience there that really opened that spiritual door for me. I know that kind of sounds odd, but that's really the only way that I can make an analogy of it. And when I heard about the fellowship, I remember I was running in between classes, and I ran into Julia actually, because she's actually my best friend and my roommate. But I was like, oh my God, what are you doing later? Let's get dinner. And she's like, no, actually, if you want to get dinner this time we can, but I'm going to the fellowship, like briefing, info session. I was like, oh, you know, what is that? And she's like, well, and she explained it. And I was like, wow, you know, that might be something that I'm interested in because I have this like calling to return to Africa and, you know, continue my spiritual journey there because that was something that I was craving. Like a year went by and I was like, wow, I really want to discover this more. But I want to simultaneously do something that allows me to benefit like mutually with other people, not just myself. And so I went to the info session and afterwards I was like, wow, I definitely need to look into locations in Africa because this is something that I can totally see myself doing. And I just had this like urge inside of me, this call to do it. And so I was like, I can't ignore that. So I did go to Montebello, but I also did get to go to Peter Maritzburg for a little bit of time and stay with the brothers while I was there. It was like I went for 1 weekend at the beginning and then I went for the last week. And while I was with the sisters, a basic rundown of my day, we'd wake up and we would go to Mass, which was absolutely beautiful. Although it was very early in the morning, I would walk out of the chapel just feeling like I had this weight off my shoulders, like it was a new day. I couldn't wait to get to class. I was embraced by this warmth that I honestly had never felt before. And I knew as soon as I walked in, like to the convent, I was staying with sisters, that I belonged there. Like I was in the right place. So I would go to Mass, I'd come back to the convent, we would have breakfast together. The sisters, they'd always be running around because all of them had like their own duties to do during the day. So we would eat breakfast, which was a great way to socialize with them. And they were always up to something too, so interesting. I was like, wow, what are you doing today? But then I would either go, so usually I would go to Crush first, Euphoria is the name of it, and that is equivalent to their preschool and our first grade. It's around that age level. They have to combine them because they don't have enough students enrolled to do it separately. And while I was there, I would be teaching English in the morning. And we would be playing, I mean, they were so little, but when I say teaching English, really, we were learning nursery rhymes, learning the alphabet, learning their animals, and things like that. So it was a lot of game playing, but they were so sweet. And they just absolutely adored me, and I enjoyed every second of it. I was like, yes, love me. They were so funny. They were just so intrigued by me, and like the love that they gave me. If you read through my blog, you'll see that I highlight like love a lot. But honestly, love truly like is my religion to me. Like God is love, and I really experienced that there with those children. They were just so special. And when I would have a break, the sisters would always be yelling at me. They're like, you need to go take your tea, you need to go get your tea break. And I'm like, no, I need to go to the high school. Because right when I got there, I was supposed to be spending time with the high school was all girls, by the way. I was supposed to be spending time with them and getting to know them. We were going to talk about current events. Like, I just was curious what their ideologies were, where they were in their lives. And when I got there, they asked me if I could teach at the high school. And I was like, well, you see, I've never done that before, but sure, I can help out in any way possible. And they were like, wow, like that would be so, like we would be so grateful, thank you. And then they asked me to teach science and life science. So I was doing a little bit of that. I'd be like running from creche when they would be on like lunch over to the high school, because it was all in like the same compound, like the convent. And I would go to the high school, and the girls are so funny because, I mean, I really wasn't that much older than most of them. Like some of the girls that I were teaching, they were 17, 18. I was like, yeah, I'm turning 20 in a couple days. They were like, oh my gosh, you're so young. But they were so accepting and kind, and we really got to know each other, like not only academically, but like intellectually, we really explored some very interesting topics, and to immerse myself in that environment totally outside of my realm. I've never taught anything before. They were so welcoming about it, and forever grateful for all those girls. And we actually still talk. I was talking to one of them this morning on Facebook Messenger. They're so good. They're on break right now, so they're all home, but they'll be going back to school soon. And after that, I'd run back to the convent, we'd have lunch, and then I would be going to the Vianney Children's Home, which is owned and operated by the convent, by the Dominican sisters there. And so the Vianney Children's Home is probably the most special thing to me, like in my heart on this trip. And those children, most of them actually do have families, but for one reason or another, they've been taken to this children's home where they spend the majority of their time, especially during the school year, living, because it's unsafe for them to be home, which is just, terribly sad. South Africa has a poor history of violence and crime, and you would never think that by meeting the people and the children, because they're all just so kind. But it's kind of similar to Jack's presentation that he was saying in Nicaragua, like this violence and this crime sometimes overshadows the kindness and the love of the people. And these children just open arms. They didn't even know me. I'd walk in and they'd be like, wow, like, who's this lady? Like, is she a sister? Like, is this Sister Luciana? And they're like, no, this is mom. Like, this is your new mom. Like, this is Mom Luciana. And I was like, like tears. I was literally in tears. And they would like call me mom, and they looked at me like their mom, and it makes me emotional, but I miss them so much. So that was Montebello. That was pretty much every day. And then when I got over to Peter Maritzburg, so I was supposed to be volunteering for the Sino Mwando Center, but unfortunately, one of the brothers who works with that project, I think he actually might have had a death in the family, unfortunately, so he had to go home, because most of the brothers aren't actually from South Africa. Most of them are from other countries in Africa. So he flew home, and then the director, it was just messy. So unfortunately, I never did make it there, but I did get to spend a lot of time at the Priory and really get to know some of the older friars, like Father Joe. Do you remember Father Joe? Yeah. I went to South Africa too, to Peter Maritzburg. He is just so intelligent, and we would have these mind-boggling conversations at 11:30 in the morning while I'm trying to eat my breakfast. I'm like, oh my goodness. I would never expect to have had an experience like that and been able to meet such incredible people. And then one thing I did want to show you, one of my really good friends, actually I still talk to him, his name is Friar Ignatius, and he gave me this keychain that he was given when he was an infant, because this is an elephant and this is his totem. And this is really, really special to me. For him to have given it to me, it means so much to him. Just really that's just so special and so meaningful that he did that. So if you want to look at it, it's so cute. But yes, so on this trip, it definitely broke me. I did this by myself. There was nobody else on this trip with me, so there were a couple of times where I'm very social. I enjoy being around people, and like I said, the sisters are always busy. So yes, I was there and I was a guest, but I wasn't their responsibility kind of thing. I was an adult. I was teaching, so when I'd come home, we'd have dinner, and then I'd go back to my room, and the sisters and I would hang out sometimes. But I was kind of alone a lot. And so that was really hard for me, but honestly, that challenge was what I needed, because I've come back from this trip, and not only is my spirituality stronger, but my ability to manage my time and take some time for me, and that's okay. I've come to learn that that is okay. Like, I've accepted that. And honestly, just all of the incredible people I've met, we still talk, and I really love South Africa. It's such a beautiful country. That's it.
Thank you so much. If you are interested in potentially applying for a Smith Fellowship, there are info sessions next week. Come talk to me. It's a beautiful opportunity to encounter what it means to be Dominican and Catholic around the world in many different places. And so, talk to you soon. And please grab some snacks before you go. There's plenty left over. But have a good night.